So just to show you quickly how you can do this without an airbrush, I'm going to cover up this tiny little portion of the tattoo here. So first step, again, we're going to take some alcohol on a cotton pad and just remove any excess oil that there may be from the area. Now with a brush and our little bit of alcohol and Skin Illustrator palette, we're going to do the same color correction. Now remember, if you don't have the Skin Illustrator palettes, you can use your cream makeup for this as well. Conversely, if you don't have a specific cream makeup like the palettes that we showed, you can also use eyeliners here. Eyeliners and lip liners work really well for this, for drawing really straight in, for color correction, and then using traditional foundations. There are a lot of different brands on the market too that you can purchase that are made specifically for tattoo cover-up that are not necessarily airbrush. A couple that are most popular is one called Dermablend and Dermaflage. Those are both very highly pigmented concealers and correctors that were actually made to do tattoo cover-up. So there are options as far as what you decide to use to actually do it, some that are more affordable and some that are more appropriate than others. It really just depends on what you're doing it for and what your budget is at the end of the day. So to start this, I'm going to do the same color correction in sort of a burnt orange color. And I just have a tiny little brush. And this is going to be drawn directly on top. Now because this is alcohol based, painting it on may take a minute longer to dry down than the airbrush did. So just be patient with it, just don't overfill it with color so that it starts dripping down. You just don't want it to be that saturated with the alcohol itself. This will take a few more layers to build up, as these paints are meant to be fairly translucent, so building them up to the opacity is what you want to do, as opposed to getting them very thick to begin with. They are meant to look like they blend into the skin, so working in thin layers is the goal here. And you'll see also, I'm not always taking it straight from the pan. I'm mixing it with some plain alcohol up here on the top and using this as my palette. That way you have control over the pigment as opposed to just picking straight up from there. It's little things like that. As you learn your products, you'll be able to make a more educated decision of where you're going to blend your products and how you're going to get it to get the consistency you're looking for. You may also feel like you're using too much alcohol or that it goes pretty fast. And it's because you are, because it is 99% alcohol, so it does evaporate very quickly once it hits the air. So you could be blending, go back in for more, and it could already be dry. So that's how it's meant to be worn. It'll just take a good bit of dipping in back and forth to get where you want it. Just follow as close as you can on top of the tattoo. And one thing too to note is that sometimes you'll be covering tattoos up just to hide the fact that there's a tattoo there, but sometimes you can also be covering a tattoo to put another one in its place. So for example, that tattoo we covered on her wrist, the director or whoever you're working with, photographer, may have wanted a specific tattoo design in that area. So covering up the tattoo to give a blank canvas, now you can put anything else on top of that. That is a thing that happens all the time as well. Okay, now that we've gone ahead and color corrected, we're going to mix up some color of rubber mask grease. I'm not going to be mixing it with the Prosade cream to make it a PAX paint because we're not trying to make this one last that long. Just know that if you are trying to make it last longer, you will want to use PAX paint or mix your rubber mask grease with Prosade cream to make it more durable. Now we're going to be working off of our metal palette here, scooping some of the product out and blending in. Now this part of her back is much tanner than the front part of her arm was. So we're going to custom blend again to get where we want it to go. These paints also take a bit of getting used to. They are heavy pigment based in castor oil, so if you are having a hard time blending them out, thinning it with a little bit of pure castor oil will help to make it a little bit more fluid so you can get a better blend until you get used to the product. I'm just going to test the color a little bit off to the side before we get started. And I can see that it still needs a little bit more of a tan from there. So I'm going to take a little bit of our darker tone. And mix these colors together. Okay, this one is a bit darker, which remember we want the first layer to be darker than the final layer. So I'm just going to get a nice even application of this. Now because this product is so thick, you really want to just tap it onto the skin. Sweeping it is going to not blend so well, but if you just tap right on top. And be careful too, if you're only trying to cover one portion of the tattoo up, make sure that you're not covering the other one around there. Granted, you can take a cotton bud and a little bit of remover afterwards to balance it out and remove, but just be aware of where you're placing it to help you do less work at the end. And you can see that this is a very opaque product. This stuff is actually formulated to be used on rubber masks. That's why it's called rubber mask grease. So we use this for latex prosthetics. We also use this for bald caps, things that require a very heavy opaque finish, but also for tattoo cover because it is a very full cover product. Now that we have our darker layer, we can go ahead and mix a exact skin tone match on top of here to neutralize it all. Now that we've blended a color, I'm going to go ahead and test again on an outside area. Now the tone is still a bit light because she does have that summer bronze. So what I'm going to do is cover up with this and then actually use a bronzer on top to help balance the warmth of it. Because we don't have a rubber mask grease that has the same level of bronze warmth that she does, just going in with a somewhat lighter tone and then balancing with some traditional cosmetics will be the best route here. This is a new sponge, that way it doesn't blend the color with the old one. Now what I'm going to do before I go in with bronzer to balance the tone is I'm going to do the same setting powder technique as before. We take the translucent powder, get some on our sponge and sort of wiggle it inside. And just lightly press. And we can dust the excess away. And I'm going to grab a bronzer to deepen this up a bit, and then we'll still do the same flecking designs as before to bring some life back in. Okay, so I am just using a satin finish bronzer to pull a little bit more of this warm tone back into the skin. This is a really great technique if you're finding that the color palettes that you have in cream-wise don't exactly match. If they don't have something that you can mix to make the right color, you can always use other things to balance it out. So it's a really good practice in seeing what you have and seeing how you can adjust what you have to make yourself a little bit more fluid. That way you're not stuck to knowing how to only work with the one things that you have. You can think on your toes, you can find different ways around it. See, now we see it blending much more into the skin. We didn't have that bronze tone that I was looking for. So balancing with an actual bronzer will bring more life back in. After we've balanced that out a bit, now we're going to go in and fleck in the multiple tones to break this up a bit so it doesn't look too flat on her. Now, because this part of her arm is a bit more tan than the wrist, we're not going to do as much blue on this area than we did before because there's not as much visible blue. So we'll still do a little bit of it just to bring some tone back in. But we are going to do a bit more of a rosy tone for warmth. And then because there is such a tan here, more of this ochre color. And you can see how the more tone you add, the better the blend will be. Slightly overspraying again, that way everything's not just focused on the one area. Though similar to the airbrush, the closer you get to the skin with this, the more concentrated it will be. So if you go out bigger, you get a wider spray. The closer you get, you can actually focus it on one area versus everywhere. This is a great way to break up a flat tone on the skin so that you have a more realistic appearance. Now, since we've already powdered this and put bronzer on top, we don't necessarily need to powder this again because it's already powdered. We can, however, go in with our final seal, do a quick spritz of the final seal, and then she's ready to go.